Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and the winner of the poll for today's video, technically it was yesterday's video, but was Eurotunnel suing the UK government. So yeah, basically they're taking the UK government to court over the no-deal ferries scandal. It's attacking the process on the basis that it was, in their words, a secretive and flawed procurement process. I mean, it would be difficult to argue against either of those things. After all, it didn't go through the normal procedures for awarding government contracts. The government said this was because there wasn't time to do it with the Brexit clock ticking. And it was also certainly flawed when you consider that a multi-million-pound contract was awarded to a company without any ferries and run by a director with a shady past. That contract has since been terminated, but they tried to defend it for the longest time before they did that when it became known. Another aspect of the claim was that the bids were issued without public notice. This also seemed true because, I'll be honest, the first I'd heard about it was when they were being awarded. That was the first bit of news I heard. Members of the public are supposed to have an opportunity to consider the awarding of public contracts in the interests of full disclosure, so we can actually see what's happening to our money, but also to allow objections to be raised. Now, awarding these contracts quickly, as I say, was justified because of the looming deadline for Brexit. However, it did allow them to circumvent our established procedures, making it even easier for Tory ministers, Chris Grayling in this case, to award lucrative contracts without public scrutiny. Of course, the counter-argument to that point was that, well, we knew that not approving a withdrawal agreement would cause chaos at our ports. So the fact that there was limited time was a consequence of inaction on the part of the UK government. Other EU countries have been preparing for some time now and have already got some procedures in place to help cushion the effects of a hard Brexit. In defending their behaviour, the Department for Transport responded with, and I quote, "The Department for Transport acted transparently and competitively throughout the process of securing extra freight. This was done by approaching ferry operators and encouraging bids that could be fairly assessed against each other." But what I would say is that approaching only the companies you want to give the contracts to is neither transparent nor competitive. Also, at least one contract was awarded, as I say, to a company that wasn't a ferry operator. So on what basis were they really approaching companies? It had no ferries. It had no experience of running ferries. It was run by a man who'd been implicated in the collapse of a previous company. Also, how could it have been transparent on any level when even companies within the freight industry didn't know about it, much less members of the general public whose tax money is being spent? When it was reported that this company called Seaborne Freight had only recently formed and had no ferries or experience, the Department of Transport replied, "As with all contracts, we carefully vetted the company's commercial, technical and financial position in detail before making the award." Well, its commercial position was that it didn't have any experience of freight and so no track record at all. So how was its commercial position looked at in detail? Its technical position was that it didn't have any ferries, and also its terms and conditions were copied and pasted from that of a pizza delivery shop. So how did it pass the technical scrutiny? And its financial position was that its chief executive had been in charge of a previously failed business and left it with considerable tax debts. So I wouldn't really have thought it was vetted too strongly on financial areas either. Oh, and by the way, if you think I'm just being silly about saying they copied their policies from a pizza delivery shop, no, I'm actually serious, they did. That's literally what they did. If a comedy writer was to try and pitch this idea as a sitcom, it'd be rejected for being unbelievable. Now, when this was discussed in the House of Commons, an MP stood up and said, only Chris Grayling could award a £14 million contract to a shipping company with no money, no ships, no track record, no employees, no ports, no working website, no sailing schedule, and only one telephone line. And that lays it bare. Chris Grayling's department further made themselves look foolish by saying that the contracts had to be issued due to unforeseen circumstances. What unforeseen circumstances? That we were withdrawing from the EU? Had no one told the Department for Transport that Brexit was being a thing? The legal argument from Eurotunnel, coming on to the lawsuit, is that they found out about the scheme after the contracts had been awarded, so a company that generates much of its revenue from freight was unable to take part in or object to the procurement process. At the hearing, the presiding judge basically ruled that a 4-day trial will begin. There's enough evidence for it to go to trial. And he said it will go ahead on the 1st of March due to the urgency of the case. Also to the fact that it is very clearly a matter of the most important public interest. Now, there might also be a little bit of spice to this. The Department of Transport said during the hearing that it had nothing to do with Eurotunnel as it was a maritime contract and they couldn't possibly have fulfilled the contract. They don't have ferries. But a few years ago, Eurotunnel did have a ferry service until they were forced to get rid of it by the Competition Commission a few years ago, like 2015, I think it was. So from their point of view, here's how it looks. British regulators forced them to sell their ferry service in 2015. Then 3 years later, the British government said it didn't have enough ferries and so handed out contracts in secret, effectively said that the Eurotunnel can't be involved because they don't have any ferries. It's like, here, you're not allowed any ferries. Here, ferries. Or we're giving out contracts of ferries. Oh, no, you can't have one. You don't have any ferries. Now, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have been made to get rid of the ferries. It's all about competition, fair competition. But it just makes it look extra farcical. And it's because Eurotunnel had, to, as I say, to sell those ferries because of fears over competition rules. But there's nothing competitive about awarding publicly funded contracts in secret. In fact, there are supposed to be rules against it. You know, our friends, the EU rules. Because it could be argued, and this is very much what they're going to argue, it's like the government giving subsidies to certain companies. Now, Eurotunnel also claimed that they could increase their capacity to freight to help with the congestion at ports. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but if the contracts are for the purpose of easing that congestion, then there might also be an argument that the contracts should not have been purely maritime in nature, even though you might think that might be the best way to do it, but simply for any credible way of bypassing the normal ports which wouldn't be able to cope. So if another business was able to come up with a plan to increase freight capacity that would also alleviate the problem, then surely they should have been involved in the process. And if it turns out that their proposal wouldn't help things at all, well, fine, that's a reason for turning their application down. But surely you should give them the chance to do that. I mean, as a small aside, you know, even with the ferry plan, the ports that have been earmarked for use with the contracts issued are not ready anyway. So there won't be many of these ferries even able to operate on whatever basis. Port authorities in both the UK and the wider EU have said that they don't have the capacity to cope with what the government plans call for. So the government sent out all this money to get ferries. And bear in mind, those ferries are currently doing something else anyway. It's not like they're sat in dry dock anywhere. You know, they're currently doing other things. So you're gonna remove some ferry services for some purposes, presumably ferrying people forwards and backwards, and put them onto freight. Okay, emergency situation. But the ports they think these ferries are going to be running to and from are not ready. You know, the people in these port towns are going, no, what? You're having a laugh. And obviously in the UK, you might argue the government might be able to do something extra investment to try and get them ready. There's been no evidence of that. They can't do that in other EU countries, can they? You know, if a port in Holland says it's not ready, it's not ready. That's all there is to it. But what the issue also highlights is the extent to which companies and even countries themselves will take governments to court over something that negatively impacts them. The reason Eurotunnel are taking the UK government to court is because they can potentially be missing out on business as a result of the way they've done this. And that's what a lot of people are missing over various border issues. Those who keep saying that a no-deal Brexit, where the UK will just simply not observe border checks, it'll just ignore it, are not only arguing against the whole point of being in favour of no deal in the first place, which is surely to put up hard borders, but that everyone negatively affected, will take the UK government to court. And there's over 150 countries negatively affected. Not that the quantity matters in this case. What matters is big beefy countries with huge economies that have the habit of making sure that their economic interests are enforced. Say the United States and China, for example. So the Department of Transport lawsuit might just be the first of many if we actually crash out with no deal and we try doing anything at all to circumvent the normal rules that should then apply. So anyway, that's the story of the lawsuit there. Obviously, that case will be going from the 1st of March for 4 days, and then I guess we'll have a decision the week after that. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share for further content. And there'll be a poll for Saturday's video going up when you've seen this, and I will remember to do it this time. Tomorrow, I want to talk about what Parliament are doing right now, which is debating and voting on amendments. I don't believe any of them will get a majority, but if any of them do, it could be very, very interesting. And there's certainly been some interesting debates going on today that I want to talk about anyway. So until next time, I'll see you later.